I am Liam, 32 years old. 2 years ago, I lost my marriage, my life savings, and my entire family in a single devastating week while I was sleeping on a friend's stained couch with absolutely nothing to my name. My own parents looked me in the eye and told me I was the one to blame for my wife's infidelity, laughing at my pain while taking her side right in front of the entire neighborhood. And my own brother, he sold me out for few expensive dinners and the promise of networking with fake rich friends. But there is one thing they did not know. While they were busy burying me and acting like I was the villain of my own life, I was silently building an empire. I secured the real estate. I bought out a multi-million-dollar business. And now the very same people who threw me to the wolves are standing on my front porch in the freezing rain, begging for a place to sleep. Before I tell you exactly what happened and how I got my revenge, hit that like button if you believe in true justice, and do not forget to let me know where you're watching from in the comment section below. Your support means everything to me. Now let's go back to where it all started. It was a late Tuesday evening and the rain was coming down in thick, heavy sheets against the brand new double-paned windows of my home. I was sitting in my custom leather recliner in the living room, nursing a hot cup of black coffee and watching the high-definition feed from my security cameras. I had installed that system the very same day I signed the closing papers for the house. You learn to appreciate security and thick walls when you have had everything you ever worked for stolen from you by the people who were supposed to love you the most. On the digital screen, bathed in the harsh, unforgiving white glow of the motion sensor porch light, was my younger brother, Derek. He was 28 years old, the absolute golden child of the family, the one who could do absolutely no wrong in my parents' eyes. He was standing there shivering, surrounded by 3 black garbage bags, stuffed to the brim with wrinkled clothes, a battered vintage suitcase, and his 2 young kids who were looking miserable and exhausted in the damp cold. My cell phone vibrated violently on the oak coffee table. It was my mother. The text message read that I was a heartless monster, that family always comes first, and that if I did not open my door right that second, she would get a lawyer involved to sue me for emotional distress and grandparental alienation. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee. I did not feel an ounce of panic. I did not feel a shred of guilt. The only thing I felt in my chest was the quiet, undeniable satisfaction of a man who finally held all the cards in a game he never wanted to play. It is genuinely funny how a piece of real estate changes people's perception of you. For 2 long, grueling years, I was an absolute ghost to them. I was the embarrassing failure they scrubbed from their holiday photos and social media feeds. I was the guy they whispered about at community HOA meetings and family Thanksgiving dinners. I was the cautionary tale, but the exact second the public county record showed my name on a prime piece of suburban real estate, suddenly I was their beloved family member again. Suddenly my brother's eviction from his apartment was my personal emergency to solve. I watched Derek raise his fist and bang aggressively on the solid oak front door. He was yelling something I could not quite hear over the storm, his face contorted in that familiar, entitled rage I had grown up tiptoeing around. He fully expected me to cave. He expected the old Liam, the doormat, to rush to the door, apologize profusely for taking so long, and immediately offer up my pristine guest bedrooms, my fully stocked refrigerator, and my hard-earned wallet. That was the toxic dynamic we grew up with. I worked, I sacrificed, I provided the safety net. And Derek simply took whatever he wanted, without a single word of gratitude. But the Liam he knew died 2 years ago. The man sitting in that recliner was forged in a kind of emotional fire that Derek could not even begin to comprehend. I picked up my phone, opened the smart home security app, and pressed a single digital button. The Heavy deadbolt on the front door clicked, audibly, locking with a definitive metallic thud that echoed through the quiet hallway. Derek froze on the porch, clearly. Hearing the sound, he looked straight up. At the camera lens, I knew he could not see me sitting in the dark, but I stared right back into his panicked eyes through the screen. I watched him pull out his phone with trembling hands. A second later, my phone buzzed again. It was a rapid-fire series of texts from him, calling me every vile name in the dictionary, accusing me of abandoning my own flesh and blood to the streets. I did not reply. I did not even flinch. I just sat, the phone face down on the table. People ask me how I can be so unbelievably cold. They ask how I can look at my own brother standing in the freezing rain with his children and absolutely refuse to turn the doorknob. The answer is incredibly simple, but it is a lesson I had to pay for with my soul. Boundaries are not built with polite apologies or second chances. They are built with concrete. And to understand why my concrete is so thick, why my empathy for them has completely evaporated, you have to understand the sheer unadulterated brutality of what they did to me. You have to understand that I did not just lose my family through some tragic misunderstanding. I was systematically dismantled and thrown away by them 2 years prior to that. Night on the porch, my life was aggressively average, and I was perfectly content with that reality. I worked long, grueling hours as a mechanic at a local independent auto shop. I paid my taxes on time. I consistently contributed to my 401k, and I came home every evening with grease under my fingernails to a rented house in a decent, quiet suburban neighborhood. I was married to a woman named Sarah. We had met in our early college days, and I genuinely thought we had built a rock-solid foundation that could weather any storm. We had our comfortable routines, our inside jokes, and what I foolishly believed was a deep mutual respect. Our 6th wedding anniversary fell on a Friday. I had been working exhausting overtime shifts for 3 solid months just to afford a specific diamond necklace she had been dropping not so subtle hints about for half a year. I clocked out of the garage early that afternoon, bought a massive bouquet of her favorite white lilies from a premium florist, and drove home with this massive, naive smile plastered across my face. I was so excited to see her reaction. I thought I was the best husband in the world in that specific moment. When I pulled onto our quiet residential street, my good mood faltered slightly. I noticed a sleek silver Porsche 911 parked arrogantly right in the middle of our driveway. It belonged to Julian, the slick, overly cologned guy who lived 3 doors down the street. He was a corporate finance guy who was always flaunting his wealth, always making passive-aggressive comments about my steel-toed work boots, my grease-stained jeans, and my modest salary. I assumed he was visiting another neighbor and was just rudely using my parking spot because he felt entitled to it. I parked on the street and unlocked the front door as quietly as humanly possible, wanting to surprise Sarah in the kitchen or the living room. The house was dead. Silent, a little too silent. I walked slowly up the carpeted stairs, gripping the fragrant flowers in my left hand and the velvet jewelry box in my right. When I reached the landing and pushed open our bedroom door, the reality of my entire existence shattered into a million jagged pieces. Sarah was in our bed with Julian. I stood there in the doorway, completely paralyzed by a shock so profound it felt like I had been struck by lightning. I expected screaming. I expected her to scramble desperately for a blanket, to burst into tears, to beg for my forgiveness, to say it was a horrible mistake, but she did absolutely none of that. Sarah slowly looked over her bare shoulder, made direct eye contact with me, and her expression held nothing but pure unadulterante danneggiante. She actually rolled her eyes at me because I had the audacity to interrupt them in my own home. I dropped the flowers, the lilies, scattered across the hardwood floor. I do not even remember what I said. My brain went into total survival mode. I only remember the absolute chilling coldness in her voice when she sat up and told me to get out and close the door so they could finish. She had zero remorse, none. The marriage had been dead for a very long time, and I was the only idiot who had not noticed the corpse. The subsequent divorce was then absolute bloodbath. Sarah hired an absolute shark of a lawyer, a guy in a $3,000 bespoke suit who looked at me across the mediation table like I was a cockroach he wanted to step on. She wanted everything, and she was ruthless about getting it. She completely drained our joint checking account before I even comprehended what was happening or had the chance to freeze the assets. She even tried to legally take possession of the vintage muscle car I had bought and restored with my own hands years before we ever met. I could barely afford a discount attorney who spent our build consultations checking his fantasy football roster instead of reading my case files because my name was the only one on the lease and the landlord did not want the drama. I lost the rental house. I lost every penny of my savings fighting the relentless lawsuit she filed. I ended up packing my entire adult life into two cheap canvas duffel bags and sleeping on a lumpy cat hair covered couch in the cramped living room of my best friend, Ethan. But the real knife in the back, the one that truly severed my soul, did not come from Sarah, came from my own blood. I drove to my parents' house that following Sunday. I was entirely broken. I needed my mother to hug me and tell me it would be okay. I needed my father to give me some solid grounding advice on how to rebuild. I sat at their pristine kitchen table, staring blankly at a cold cup of chamomile tea, and told them everything. I told them about walking in on Julian. I told them about the total lack of empathy, the stolen money, the sheer cruelty of it all. My mother, Eleanor, sighed heavily, adjusted her glasses, and crossed her arms over her chest. She looked at me, not with maternal pity, but with deep exhaustion. Well, relationships are incredibly complicated, Liam, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. You must have been neglecting her needs. Women do not just stray for no reason. You need to swallow your pride, compromise, and win her back. I stared at her, thinking I had suffered a stroke, and misheard her. Mom, I caught her in my bed with another man. She stole all my money. My dad, Arthur, chimed in, immediately pointing a stern, accusatory finger at my face. A real man keeps his household in order, Liam. You clearly failed to provide the lifestyle she needed and deserved. Now, you are embarrassing this entire family with this public divorce nonsense. You need to fix this. I left their house, feeling like the oxygen had been sucked out of my lungs. The betrayal was dizzying. I thought surely I could rely on my brother, Derek. I had practically raised him. When our dad was emotionally absent and physically distant, I was the one who bought Derek's school supplies, fixed his junk cars for free, and paid his rent on multiple occasions when he blew his entire paycheck on partying and reckless decisions. I called him from Ethan's driveway, standing in the cold wind. Derek answered on the third ring, loud club, music thumping in the background. Hey, man, I really need to talk to you, I said, my voice cracking under the weight of the week. Cannot do it right now, bro, Derek said, sounding entirely too cheerful and relaxed. I am out at an expensive steakhouse downtown. Sarah actually took me out. My stomach plummeted to my knees. You're having dinner with my wife, the woman who just completely destroyed my life. Derek laughed. It was a cruel, highly dismissive sound that I will never forget. Look, Liam, she is actually being really cool about everything. She bought me this sick designer jacket. Plus, she is introducing me to this guy, Vincent, later. Tonight, he drives a Ferrari total. Baller. He might have a high-paying job. For me and his firm, do not be so bitter. And jealous, man. You probably drove her. To cheat anyway, men never understand what women actually need. He hung up on me. The line went dead. I stood there in the freezing rain holding a cheap cell phone that had just severed. My last remaining tie to humanity, Derek, was literally trading his loyalty to his own flesh and blood brother for a free steak dinner, a jacket, and the pathetic chance to hang around a fake sugar daddy. My own parents were actively blaming me for being the victim of a ruthless betrayal because it was easier than dealing with the truth. I did not cry. The sadness completely evaporated, leaving behind a cold, hard, crystalline focus in my mind. I realized in that exact moment that I was completely and utterly on my own in this world. No one was coming to save me. I was not going to get an inheritance. I was not going to get a safety net. And I certainly was not going to get an apology. I opened my phone settings. I blocked Derek's number. I blocked my mother's number. I blocked my father's number. I walked back into Ethan's house, sat on that awful, uncomfortable couch, and made a silent vow to the universe. I was going to rebuild my life from the absolute ashes, and I was going to make sure that when I finally reached the top of the mountain, the door would be permanently locked behind me. The very first step of my revenge was getting off Ethan's couch and establishing a base of operations. I scoured the classifieds and found the absolute cheapest apartment in the worst possible part of town. It was a literal shoebox. You could sit on the lumpy mattress and physically touch the humming refrigerator, the greasy stove, and the bathroom door all at the exact same time. It smelled intensely of damp drywall, stale beer, and the previous tenant's heavy, lingering smoking habit. Every single night I would lie in the dark, look up at the expanding water stains on the ceiling, and think about Julie and Sleek. Portia. I thought about Derek parading around town in the designer jacket Sarah bought with the money she stole from my college fund savings. I saw all their gloating social media posts through Ethan's account because I had deleted my own. Sarah and Derek were suddenly best friends, taking endless selfies at high-end restaurants, posting incredibly long preachy captions about cutting toxic energy out of their lives. Toxic energy they were referring to was me. They even went on a luxurious weekend beach vacation that Sarah and I had planned for years, but supposedly never had the budget for. Funny how she suddenly found the funds the exact moment she legally kicked me out of my own life. The absolute breaking point, the moment the final drop of my patience evaporated, happened about a month into my grim new reality. I was at the local discount grocery store on a Tuesday evening. I had exactly $12.50 to my name to last the entire week until payday. I was pushing a squeaky basket filled with off-brand ramen noodles and the cheapest, most bitter instant coffee I could find on the bottom shelf. As I turned the corner into the snack aisle, I accidentally bumped my basket into a shopping cart. I looked up and locked eyes with Derek. His cart was overflowing with premium imported cheeses, expensive cuts of steak, and high-end craft beer. Stuff he could absolutely never afford on his part-time minimum wage salary. And sure enough, he was wearing the expensive jacket Sarah had bought him. He looked down at my pathetic basket, then looked back up at my tired face. A slow, incredibly condescending smirk spread across his face. He did not look guilty. He looked triumphant. Man, you look terrible, Liam, Derek said, projecting his voice loud enough for the strangers in the next aisle to clearly hear. Are you even eating enough? Because that sodium garbage in your basket is going to kill you. I gripped the red plastic handle of my basket until my knuckles turned completely white. Just leave me alone, Derek. Walk away. He ignored me and leaned in closer, dropping his voice to a conspiratorial whisper, but keeping that utterly mocking tone. You know, Sarah told me everything about why you guys failed. You really should have paid more attention to her physical needs. Her new guy, Julian, is taking us all out to an exclusive country club this weekend. He is so generous. Maybe he has a friend who can buy you some real groceries so you don't starve. He actually gestured to my ramen noodles and laughed. My own brother, the kid I had fed and clothed when our parents refused to, the kid whose scraped knees I had bandaged, was standing in a brightly lit grocery store, telling me I deserved to be cheated on, while actively mocking my extreme poverty. I did not yell. I did not cause a scene. I did not swing at him, even though every single muscle fiber in my body wanted to break his jaw. I just set my basket gently down on the linoleum floor, turned my back on him, and walked straight out of the automatic doors into the night. I left the groceries right there in the aisle that night, back in my shoebox apartment. The fire in my chest stopped burning and became a controlled, calculated inferno. I completely stopped feeling sorry for myself. I stopped wondering why my family did not love me. I channeled every single ounce of my betrayal and rage into raw, unrelenting ambition. I was going to work until my hands bled. I was going to secure an income so massive it would make their heads spin and their knees buckle. My daily routine became genuinely psychotic. I woke up at exactly 5 o'clock in the morning and lifted rusted, mismatched dumbbells in the apartment building's gloomy, poorly lit basement gym. I was clocked in at the garage by 6:30. I worked my standard 12-hour shift, volunteering to take on every complicated engine, rebuild every filthy transmission job, and every emergency repair that the other mechanics complained about or flat out refused. Then on the weekends, I ran a highly lucrative under-the-table operation in a vacant parking lot across town, doing brake pads, alternator swaps, and oil changes for straight cash. I took every single dollar of that cash and invested it directly into my brain. I enrolled in an intensive online business and accounting program. After 14 hours of violently turning heavy wrenches, I would sit at my tiny, wobbly folding table, eat a bowl of plain, cheap rice, and study complex financial principles until my vision literally blurred and my head pounded. It was agonizing. I failed my first major practice exam so miserably that I thought about quitting. My online tutor, an older gentleman named Mr. Henderson, actually tracked down my cell phone number and called me to ask if I was going through a personal crisis because my test scores were so wildly erratic. I told him the truth. I was just exhausted. He told me that exhaustion is temporary, but failure is permanent. So I pushed harder. I made hundreds of flashcards. I watched financial lectures on my phone while eating lunch sitting on a greasy oil drum at the back of the shop. Slowly, painfully, the numbers started making sense. I started looking at the garage where I worked, owned by an older, gruff guy named Marcus, not just as a physical place to fix cars, but as a complex business system. Marcus was a great mechanic, but he was doing everything the old school way. Paper, invoices, zero inventory tracking, and pricing jobs based on his gut feeling rather than actual market data. He was losing thousands of dollars a month on poor supply chain management and bad vendor pricing. I stayed late one Tuesday evening and built a massive, highly detailed spreadsheet. I tracked our profit margins over the last 6 months, identified our most profitable services, and mapped out a completely new, streamlined supply chain. I walked into Marcus's cramped office the next morning and handed the printed packet to him. Marcus put on his reading glasses, looked at the numbers, and then looked up at me with sheer disbelief. Where the hell did you learn to do all this, Liam? Online night classes, I said confidently. You are bleeding money on parts, Marcus. If you let me handle the ordering, the customer scheduling, and the vendor negotiations, I can boost our profit margin by 30% in 6 months. He stared at me for a long moment, then gave me the reins. First, it was just ordering parts. Then I was handling the payroll and hiring. Within 6 short months, I was essentially the general manager running the entire operation, while Marcus mostly supervised and played solitaire in his back office. And I was dead right. Our profits skyrocketed by exactly 30%. I got a massive promotion. My salary doubled. I was saving every single penny that did not go directly to rent or cheap food. I had zero social life, no dates, no vacations, just the relentless, agonizing grind. And then, just as I was finding my footing, the universe finally started balancing the scales. Ethan came into the shop one afternoon for a routine oil change. He leaned casually against the open bay door, drinking a soda, and gave me the update I had explicitly not asked for, but deeply, desperately needed to hear. Julian, the arrogant Porsche-driving neighbor, had dumped Sarah. He completely kicked her out of his house, barely 2 months after our divorce was finalized, because he found a younger, less complicated woman. Sarah had blown through all the cash she stole from me, trying desperately to keep up with his wealthy lifestyle, buying designer bags and treating Derek to expensive dinners. Now she was totally broke, unemployed, and couch surfing at her angry mother's house. And what about the golden child? Derek, the Ferrari driving sugar daddy. He had abandoned his own brother, who turned out to be a massive, humiliating fraud. The guy was an unemployed scammer who rented exotic cars by the hour just to pick up gullible people at nightclubs. When Derek finally tried to leverage the guy for the high-paying job he was promised, the guy took him to a 5-star restaurant, ordered $2,000 worth of food and wine, went to the bathroom, and vanished into the night, leaving Derek with a massive bill. Derek had arrogantly quit his steady insurance job, thinking he was set for a life of luxury, and now he was drowning in credit card debt and facing eviction. I kept my head under the hood of the truck I was working on. I did not laugh out loud. I did not pump my fist or gloat to Ethan. I just grabbed my torque wrench, tightened a bolt, and felt a deep, profound, warming sense of peace wash over my entire body. Karma was finally doing its job, and it was working. Over time, about a year into my relentless, nonstop grind, Marcus called me into his office long after closing time. The garage was entirely quiet, smelling faintly of citrus degreaser and old rubber tires. He poured 2 cups of terrible break room coffee, pushed one across the scarred wooden desk to me, and sat down heavily in his chair. My wife's arthritis is getting significantly worse, Marcus said, looking tired but incredibly resolute. The doctor says the freezing cold winters here are doing permanent damage to her joints. We need to move to Arizona for the warmer climate. My heart immediately skipped a beat, plummeting into my stomach. If he sold the shop to a massive corporate chain, I would lose my management position. I would be right back to being a basic, expendable mechanic answering to a regional director who only cared about quotas. All my hard work would vanish overnight. So what exactly does that mean for the shop? I asked, trying desperately to keep my voice casual and hide the rising panic. Marcus leaned forward, folding his calloused hands on the desk. It means I want to severely accelerate our timeline. I have been watching you, Liam. You actually give a damn about this place. You increase the bottom line by 30%. I do not want to sell my life's work to some faceless corporation that will fire everyone and jack up the prices. I want to sell it to you. I stared at him completely speechless. Own the garage? Be my own boss? Felt impossible. Marcus, I have money saved. I really do, but I do not have commercial real estate money. I do not have the capital for a massive down payment yet. We will do a seller financed buyout. He explained, waving his hand to dismiss my financial concerns. We do it in 2 years, instead of the 5 we originally discussed. You take full ownership by the end of this year. We structure a manageable payment schedule taken directly from the business profits. You are the boss, Liam. I walked out of the shop that night feeling like gravity no longer applied to my body. I was going to own the business. It was actually happening. I immediately took a massive chunk of my savings, money I had literally bled and starved for over the past 2 years, and contacted a real estate agent. Within a month, I put a solid down payment on a beautiful, modest 3-bedroom house in a quiet, upscale neighborhood. It had a pristine wraparound porch, a huge garage for my projects, and most importantly, it was entirely legally mine. No landlord to answer to, no shared walls with noisy neighbors, just a fortress built by my own 2 hands. The exact day my real estate agent handed me the shiny new keys and we officially closed the deal, I sat on my back porch with a cold soda and looked up at the sky, finally, feeling like I could breathe again. I made a rare decision. I took a simple picture of the front of the house and posted it online. Just a simple caption: new chapter, new home. Hard work pays off. I knew Ethan would share it. I knew the incredibly toxic network of hometown gossip would absolutely ensure my family saw it, and I was right. Part of me wanted them to see it. I wanted them to choke on their past words. Within 4 hours of hitting publish, my phone buzzed with an incoming text from an unknown number. It was Derek. Hey, bro, saw the new house on Facebook. Looks amazing. Family should always stick together. We really need to catch up and grab a beer. I read the text glowing on my screen and actually laughed out loud in my empty kitchen. The sheer audacity, the absolute breathtaking lack of shame. He completely ignored my existence for over a year, mocked me when I was starving in a grocery store aisle, and the exact second I had square footage and visible assets, I was his bro again. I did not reply. I was far too busy coordinating the moving trucks and setting up my new life. But my silence only made them significantly more desperate. The next afternoon, while I was unboxing kitchen supplies, my phone rang. It was my father, the exact same man who told me I was not a real man and that I was an embarrassment to the family lineage. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. He left a 2-minute message, his voice dripping with fake, hollow paternal pride. He talked at length about how proud he was of my real estate success, and then seamlessly, shamelessly transitioned into telling me that Derek was having a tough time right now and that it was my fundamental responsibility as the older, successful brother to provide a financial safety net for him. They were circling me like hungry vultures. They smelled the money, they saw the stability, and they wanted to drain it just like Sarah had tried to do. I did not engage with their drama. I spent the next week quietly moving my belongings in, buying quality furniture, and fortifying my space. I hired a professional security company to install high-definition cameras on every corner of the property, smart locks on every single door, and motion sensors in the driveway. I was building an impenetrable castle, and I was pulling up the drawbridge. I knew with absolute certainty that it was only a matter of time before the manipulative texts and guilt-tripping calls turned into physical visits. People who feel inherently entitled to your resources do not just politely give up when you ignore them. They escalate, they demand. And that brings us right back to that rainy Tuesday night, right back to Derek, standing on my brightly lit with his garbage bags and his tired kids, aggressively demanding entry. My mother was threatening to file lawsuits. My father was leaving increasingly aggressive voicemails about family, loyalty, and custody of the children's well-being. They thought I was trapped. They thought they could use public pressure, the presence of children, and deep-seated family guilt to force my hand and break my boundaries. I sat back in my leather recliner, finished the last drop of my coffee, and watched Derek angrily kick the door through the monitor. The storm outside was just beginning to rage, but for the first time in 2 horrifying years, I was completely safe, warm, and secure from the rain. I thought the worst was over. I thought locking the door was the end of it. I was so incredibly wrong. The real war was about to begin, and I was going to destroy their entitlement with nothing but the law, my success, and the cold, hard truth. I sat completely still in my leather recliner and watched the security monitor until Derek finally gave up. I watched him kick the bottom of my solid oak front door one last time, gather his damp, pathetic garbage bags, and drag his exhausted children back to his beat-up sedan parked on the street. The red tail lights slowly faded down the wet asphalt, completely disappearing into the heavy suburban rain. I did not sleep much that night. It was not out of guilt, and it certainly was not out of regret. It was out of a deep, primal anticipation when you aggressively cut off a toxic parasite's primary food supply. The parasite does not simply die quietly in the corner. It fights back with everything it has. I knew my family dynamic better than I knew my own. Reflection. I knew their manipulative playbook inside and out. The midnight porch ambush was just their opening move. They were testing the perimeter of my newly established boundaries, and because they found reinforced concrete instead of yielding sand, I knew with absolute certainty that they would escalate to heavy artillery. The next morning, the massive storm had completely passed, leaving the tree-lined suburban streets slick, green, and perfectly clean. I drove my truck to the garage early, the crisp morning air clearing the residual tension from my mind. The shop was already humming with intense productivity by the time I walked through the bay doors. Under my meticulous management, we had completely transformed from a dusty, disorganized, old-school repair joint into a highly efficient, incredibly profitable commercial enterprise. We had recently secured lucrative long-term contracts to service entire fleets of corporate delivery vehicles for major logistics companies. The monthly revenue was absolutely staggering. I had a dedicated team of 6 master mechanics working directly under me, and Marcus was effectively retired, only coming in a few days a week to review the financial ledgers, drink cheap coffee in the back office, and offer unsolicited advice on classic car restorations. My life was finally structured, highly profitable, and fiercely secure. I had the Real estate. I had the salary. I had the peace. But toxic families possess a truly uncanny, almost supernatural radar for your peace. They absolutely despise it. They view your independence and your financial success as a direct, aggressive threat to their control over you. It happened right around noon. The massive garage bay doors were wide open to let in the warm afternoon breeze. I was standing near the front metal service counter, intensely reviewing a massive, complicated invoice for a corporate client when a pristine black luxury sedan pulled directly into my freshly paved customer parking lot. I recognized the expensive vehicle. Immediately, it was my father's car, the car he polished every Sunday while ignoring his own children. The heavy doors opened and the invasion force confidently stepped out onto the asphalt. My mother, Eleanor, emerged, first wearing her absolute Sunday best, her face permanently set in a tight mask of aggressive, unwavering self-righteousness. My father, Arthur, followed closely behind her, adjusting his expensive silk tie with an air of absolute, unquestionable authority. But they did not come alone to this fight. From the back seat emerged a man I had never seen before in my life. He was wearing a sharp, tailored navy suit, carrying a genuine leather briefcase and projecting the exact kind of manufactured, aggressive confidence that aggressively screams billable hours and courtroom bullying. He looked entirely out of place standing on the oily, tire-marked asphalt of a working mechanic's shop. I calmly set my metal clipboard down on the counter, the mechanics in the open. Bays slowly stopped what they were doing, the loud, piercing whine of pneumatic. Tools slowly dying down as they immediately sensed the sudden, hostile shift in the atmosphere. My parents marched right through the open bay. Doors, completely ignoring the bright yellow signs that clearly stated only employees were allowed beyond that specific point. The man in the navy suit trailed closely. Behind them, his cold eyes scanning the busy shop with obvious, unfiltered disdain. Liam, my mother announced, her sharp voice echoing loudly off the high tin ceiling. We need to talk right now. Stop whatever pointless thing you are doing and look at us. I did not move from behind the safety of the metal counter. I simply crossed my arms over my chest, planted my feet firmly, and looked directly at them. You are actively trespassing in a commercial workspace. Eleanor, if you need a routine oil change or a tire rotation, you can take a number and wait in the lobby like everyone else. If you are here for literally anything else, the exit is right behind you. My father aggressively stepped forward, slamming his open hand down hard on the metal counter. Do not speak to your mother with that disrespectful tone of voice. We are not playing stupid little games anymore. Liam, you locked your own brother and his innocent children out in the freezing rain last night. You are a complete disgrace to this family's name and legacy. My house, my rules, Arthur, I replied, keeping my voice incredibly calm and flat. Derek made his bed too. Long years ago when he decided a free steak dinner and a ride in a rented Ferrari with my cheating wife was significantly more valuable than my entire existence. He can sleep in that bed now. I am not his safety net. That is exactly the selfish, hostile, and ungrateful attitude we are here to officially address. My mother said, gesturing dramatically to the man in the navy suit standing beside her. Liam, this is Mr. Vance. He is a highly respected family lawyer, and we are here today to formally discuss your legal obligations to this family and the impending lawsuit we are preparing to file against you. I actually let out a short, genuine laugh that I could not suppress. A lawsuit, the sheer breathtaking delusion was almost impressive. A lawsuit? On what possible legal grounds did it suddenly become illegal to ignore toxic, manipulative relatives overnight? Because if so, half the country is going to jail. The lawyer, Mr. Vance, confidently stepped up to the counter, placing his expensive leather briefcase down and clicking the polished brass latches open with a sharp snap. He pulled out a thick stack of pristine, formally drafted legal documents. He looked at me with the exact same condescending, aristocratic sneer that Sarah's ruthless divorce attorney had used to break me 2 years ago. It was the distinct look of a wealthy man who thought he was dealing with an uneducated, easily intimidated hourly grease monkey who would fold at the first mention of legal action. Mr. Liam, the lawyer began, his voice smooth, practiced, and dripping with patronizing authority. Your parents have formally retained my firm's legal services to address the severe financial and emotional distress you have maliciously inflicted upon your brother, Derek, and, by direct extension, his minor children. We are currently preparing to file a massive civil lawsuit for grandparental alienation, emotional damages, and severe financial abandonment. Financial abandonment? I repeated, raising a skeptical eyebrow at him. Derek is a 28-year-old, able-bodied man. He is not my legal dependent. I do not claim him on my taxes. I do not owe him a roof. He is your blood family. He is your blood family, my father interrupted violently, his face turning a dangerous shade of red. You are sitting on prime real estate right now. We saw the photos you posted online. We know exactly what neighborhood that is. And we know you got a massive promotion and a huge salary increase here at the shop. You have warm, empty bedrooms, while your own brother is facing permanent homelessness and actively losing custody of his children because he currently lacks a stable residential address. A family court judge will absolutely look at your sudden wealth, look at his desperate situation, and compel you to provide housing or financial support based on historical precedent. You supported him in the past. You paid his rent. You established a clear pattern of provision. You cannot just cut off his lifeline unilaterally because you are throwing a childish tantrum over the past. It was the most absurd, legally baseless garbage I had ever heard in my entire adult life, but my parents truly, deeply believed it. They had found some bottom-feeding, aggressive attorney willing to draft a terrifying, threatening letter just to scare me into absolute submission. They honestly believed that because I had sacrificed my own well-being to bail Derek out of financial trouble for a decade, I was somehow legally bound to be his permanent ATM for the rest of his natural life. Furthermore, the lawyer continued tapping a perfectly manicured finger aggressively on his stack of documents. Your parents provided substantial emotional and material support during your formative years. They fed you, they housed you, they paid for your initial trade school certifications. Given your recent, highly lucrative acquisition of premium residential real estate, they are perfectly within their legal rights to demand a return on that early investment. If you refuse to house Derek immediately, we will petition the court to place a massive financial lien on your new property to explicitly recoup the funds they expended raising you, which honestly should have been considered your future inheritance. Anyway, I stared at them. I let the absolute, crushing silence stretch out for 10 full, agonizing seconds. I wanted to permanently memorize the arrogant, wildly entitled expressions on their faces. They truly thought they had backed me into a completely inescapable corner. They fought the terrifying threat of a massive lawsuit, the mention